Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here for our what is now a weekly state budget advocacy Zoom meeting. My name is Jeff Garris. I am the Outreach and Engagement Director with the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. I'm joined here today to provide you with some updates and information by a number of my colleagues from Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, and of course our larger organization, the Keystone Research Center, of which PBPC is a project. We're going to jump in here fairly quickly. We do have one or two folks on our staff who need to head out very quickly, so we will begin. We are recording this and we will make this available later on. Probably today we'll put this up on YouTube. If there's part of it that you miss, you're welcome to go back and watch it then. You're also welcome to share it with other folks that you know who might be interested, folks from your organization, other allies. The last thing I want to note is that all of your lines are muted. We will be taking questions throughout the presentation today. And so if you have a question, I would encourage you to submit that via the chat feature at the bottom of the screen. We'll be monitoring that and we'll try to make it possible so that you can ask your question directly. I'll let you know before I call on you and unmute your line. I'll give you a quick message to let you know that's coming so that you can be ready. If you've muted the phone on your end, when we go to a question from you, you'll need to unmute your line as well. So that's it. Thank you again for joining us. We're really pleased to have this kind of interest in our state budget. We are now only about a month and a half away from the July 1st deadline for enacting the 2020-21 budget. Our director from the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, Marc Stier, is here to provide you with some information about some of the things that are being talked about related to the budget. On that note, Marc, take it away.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm going to be very brief. I actually have some personal business I've got to take care of with some family members who are in difficult circumstances. Conversations are starting to happen. We understand at the staff level with the governor and the legislative leaders. We know there's a lot of tensions between them given the debates about opening the state. There's a lot of anger on both sides, so we don't know how well those are going to go. We also know that at this point, there's a great deal of uncertainty about the revenue situation the state is in. Everyone knows there's going to be deep losses in revenues for next year. We don't know how deep they will be and how long-lasting the recession will be. So how much revenue will be lost over the course of the year. The estimates I'm hearing, most people say $4 to $5 billion in lost revenue for next year. Maybe $1 billion to $2 billion in new expenditures, mostly for Medicaid. Again, we don't know how bad that will be either on the spending side. The thing that concerns us is we are hearing that there's going to be some effort on the part of Republicans to enact a 6-month budget and then come back in December for a lame duck session to do the second half of the budget. The difficulty with that is that they might decide to do the first 6 months with the funding that we're all expecting from the federal government. And by the way, that's another uncertainty. We don't know how much that's going to be. And with possible borrowing from the new Federal Reserve facility for state and municipal governments. What that means is putting off any hard decisions about what to cut and how to raise revenues to backfill the losses until after the election. Our position, PBPC, is that this is not how you should do business, that voters should know what our political leaders are thinking about in dealing with this crisis before an election. The legislators should start making difficult decisions about whether we're going to do what we did in the Corbett years and cut education and higher education and human services in order to balance the budget, or whether they're going to raise taxes on those who can still afford to pay them. I think in the next week or two, we're going to have a little more clarity. There's some rumors that the Republicans are going to put forward a budget, maybe even as early as next week. I don't know how true they are, but that's about where we are. So I will just say, tighten your seatbelts. We are in for a very bumpy ride in the next couple of weeks. And by next week, we should have some clarity about what the shape of the debate is going to look like. And let me stop and see if there are any questions I can take quickly.
Any questions, folks? You don't need to write the whole question in. Just put in like the word question in the chat box. Okay, I think we have a question here coming from our friend Jordy. Jordy, I'm going to look up your microphone here. I've got you unmuted. Why don't you go ahead and ask the question, Jordy?
Sure. Thanks. I mean, if there's someone later who can speak to this, I'm just wondering what we should be looking out for in terms of playing defense with the budget. Like, will they use kind of the shock doctrine on us again, trying to indemnify businesses who are forcing people to work, or you know, I feel like some states or maybe PA have been adding work requirements to any kind of COVID unemployment, and you know, sort of generally trying to do as much as they can to squeeze people instead of actually help people.
I have not heard of any movements to do that. I know it's happening in other states, and bad ideas from other states tend to come here. I think the fundamental question is, how are we going to pay for what we're already doing? I think it's already clear that the new initiatives that the government proposed are probably not going to happen. My real concern is preserving what we have. There's also the issue of what to do with the CARES Act money that cannot be used to backfill lost revenues. And there undoubtedly will be a debate about that. The Senate Democrats have put forward a proposal. The House Democrats are putting forward a proposal. We may see the Republicans do something like that next week. I think we've got to organize to make sure that CARES Act money that isn't used to balance the budget, it goes to the people who most need help, and not used to bail out, you know, businesses that are doing relatively well. But again, I don't have any specifics about what will be proposed yet, because those proposals simply haven't been put on the table.
Thanks for your question, Jordy. We're going to go to a question now. I think we have one coming up from Ron Cowell. Ron, I'm going to unmute your mic here in just a second. If you can make sure you're unmuted on your end, we'd love to hear your question. Go ahead, Ron.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just observed, you know, I've been around this for 45 years now, and I can't remember the exact years or even the administrations, but historically, and it's happened at least a couple times, these short-term budgets, whether it's 6 months or 8 months, have been used to get through an election before making tough decisions that usually mean some kind of a tax increase. And, you know, whether that's good or bad, whether it's good government or not, you know, good politics or not, we can all debate that. But there is some history to this here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I think that's right. And Ron, I'm going to give you a call, because you know that history a lot better than me, and I would love to get some details from you.
Okay.
I think that's the issue. Although in this case, they're not just putting off tax increases, they're putting off budget cuts. And I think if we do put off the big decisions, we will be faced with the question of, do we raise taxes or do we cut education spending and higher education, human services, the way we did in 2010, 2011? I think it would be a serious misfortune to let the election go by without that discussion. And I know we at PBPC are going to do everything we can to make sure people understand, as we get closer to the election, that this is the kind of choice they have to make. And we're going to ask candidates to speak on it. And we have to.
All good points. Give me a call.
Thanks for your question and your observation, Ron. Just to note that for folks, if you're not familiar with Ron Cowell, he served as a member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, representing the 34th District from 1975 to 1998. And he's now the head of the Education Policy Center, I believe is the name of it, but I may have messed that up. But again, thanks for that, Ron.
Sure.
I'm looking here to see if we have any other questions. I don't see any, and I know Mark needs to get going. So I want to thank you, Mark, for the input you gave today. And again, we'll continue to look to you for updates and information about what's going on related to the state budget and negotiations over that. Thanks, Mark. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. If you want to forward any more questions to Jeff or to me, I'd be happy to answer them offline. Have a good day, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Mark. Moving on our agenda, we have with us the Executive Director of the Keystone Research Center, Dr. Stephen Hertzenberg, who is working on some projections and some observations related to unemployment in Pennsylvania, the severity of it, and some of the implications of that, not just for the individuals who are unemployed, but also for the state, in particular the state budget. I'm going to turn it over to you now, Steve. Make sure you have your line unmuted.
I do. So
Okay.
thank you. And you're going to put the PowerPoint up, yeah?
That is correct. Let me share my screen here.
So while Jeff's doing that,
okay, can you?
Oh,
I was just asking if folks could see that yet.
let's see. There you go. Now you need to go. Yeah, probably. I probably reversed the order of the. Show me the next slide after that, Jeff, and then I'll probably have you go back to that first slide because I put them in the wrong order. So what I'm gonna walk people through is some of the different numbers related to unemployment, and because there are a variety of different numbers, and try to give you both a clearer sense and also a sense of an accurate sense of what share of the workforce that was working as of first half of March that's not working now. But let me start by giving folks the sort of official unemployment rates, and then we'll look at some other numbers and what those suggest in terms of the scale of the joblessness. So the official numbers, April, unlike March, showed a big increase in unemployment officially in the US to 14.7% from 4.4% in March. The Pennsylvania number is not out for another 8 days. So the March number is the latest one we've got for Pennsylvania is 6%. But what I'm going to walk you through now is that these numbers for the US, and actually especially for Pennsylvania, underestimate the scale of the problem. The reason for that is basically related to definitions of unemployment, where the traditional definition of unemployment is you have to be looking for work. Well, a lot of people who've been socially isolating at home, so not working since the middle of March, are basically not allowed to look for work. They're not supposed to be working. So a significant share of those folks are likely not getting captured by the official unemployment rate. Some of them are, because people who are temporarily unemployed but expected to go back to the same employer do get counted for unemployment. But the general point is that the official unemployment rate misses a lot of people. It's always criticized for doing that, which is why people sometimes use something called the underemployment rate. But again, because of this particular situation, and because people aren't searching for work, it's even more true than it would usually be that the unemployment rate is undercounting the scale of the joblessness. So then the question becomes, how do we get a better handle on the scale of the joblessness? So Jeff, go back to the previous slide. If you could, the graph that you showed before. No, the previous slide. Yeah, there you go. There you go. So what this figure shows you is the piece of data that we're actually going to use to get a better handle on the real scale of unemployment. And what it is initial unemployment claims. And this actually shows, Pennsylvania, most states don't do this, but Pennsylvania actually reports this data every single day at the website that's referenced in the source note there. And so what we did is we got from the Department of Labor and Industry data back to January 1st, and then basically we have added up the number of unemployed in the first week, and then basically have what's called a 7-day moving total that's shown on this graph. So each day shows that day and the previous six days. So what you see is that in the middle of March, all hell broke loose. And at one point we were at a 7-day total of nearly 500,000 more people filing unemployment claims. The good news, sort of, is that that spike then did come down, but even now, the last 7 days for which we have data is over 50,000, which is well above the kind of less than 10,000 number that's sort of much more typical. So now go forward, I think it's 2 slides, Jeff, sorry. There you go. No, there you go. This one. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is walk you through a calculation. So and this calculation is going to get what I'm calling the COVID unemployment rate. So what I'm going to do is say, okay, as of March 15th, the actual official March unemployment rate was computed in the reference week that ended March 12th or 13th. So as it turns out, even though it's called the March unemployment rate, it's actually the unemployment rate in a particular week in March, and it happens to have been a week right before all hell broke loose. So that 6% unemployment rate for March captures a little bit of early COVID layoffs, but it doesn't capture any of the spike you saw on that graph. So what we're going to do here is, there have been 60 days since March 16th. If you add up, and the slide wasn't updated here, sorry, add up the initial employment claims over those 60 days, not 31 days. It's now over 1.8 million. If you look at that 1.8 million as a share of the number of people in the labor force in Pennsylvania in March, that gets you 27.3%. And then if you add that number to the unemployment rate in March, which doesn't double count anyone because, again, those people were all unemployed as of the prior week, you get up to 33.3%, exactly 1/3 of the labor market. Next slide, please. And so if you see this, so because the data's provided daily, the number of initial claims for unemployment, you can actually compute a daily estimate of the unemployment rate in Pennsylvania, or the COVID unemployment rate. And again, what you see is it climbing very rapidly at first, flattening off a bit, and then now we're, again, basically at levels that are at least the equivalent of the worst of the Great Depression. Now, this is different. I mean, this is, in one respect, the fact that Pennsylvania has had even more rapid increases in unemployment claims, a more rapid increase in this sort of estimated real unemployment rate, means that we've frozen our economy more completely and more quickly than other people, which means that, you know, people are complying by and large with social distancing. And, you know, if the goal is to nip the pandemic partly in the bud and make it the infection rates lower and make the length of the pandemic shorter, then this really is the right approach. Jeff, if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so that's the good news. But what's clear from this is, again, we're still mostly shut down in Pennsylvania, and I think rightly so. Governor Wolf is doing the right thing, not being short-sighted, because if we hold to a sensible social distancing policy, not only will fewer people get infected, fewer people die, but then we should be able to get our economy going more fully and without backsliding in terms of infection rates and death, down the road. But it's definitely true that what this really means is that we need more help for people. So that $3 trillion bill that Congress is expected to begin voting on today, with lots of additional relief, including for state and local government, is absolutely something that we need. And again, the Federal Reserve Board chair, appointed by President Trump, who's a Republican, is out there yesterday making very clear that he thinks the economy needs more pumping up. And the last point there is that from our perspective, we need help for people now to pay the rent, to put food on the table, but we are going to need more help again when it's safer to more fully drive the economy forward. We'll need a stimulus to do that as well. The danger, the hope here is that because the economy was deliberately frozen and because policy tried to damage control, tried to limit the number of small businesses that went bankrupt, tried to limit the number of workers who permanently separate from their employers, so more people end up having been temporarily employed to go right back to the business that they were at before. The more we can do those things, the more it might be possible for the economy to accelerate quickly, and for us to be growing again and for state and local revenues to be recovering again. But if we don't have enough support to get the economy unfrozen quickly, then what you're going to get is you are going to get a self-reinforcing downward spiral, because you're going to, basically, if unemployment stays high, if more businesses don't have enough customers, you're going to have less investment, less consumption. It's sort of standard kind of Keynesian downturn. And again, if you get that kind of dynamic, which is more familiar and different than having deliberately frozen the economy, but if that downward spiral starts taking hold when the economy is still deep in the hole, then we are in deep trouble in terms of the consequences of this pandemic and the impact on our economy and state. So with that, let me stop, Jeff, and see if there are any questions.
Okay, I don't see any questions at the moment, but if someone has a question, just please type in the word question and we'll be glad to put you through to Steve to ask your question directly. As we wait for that, we'll weigh in here too, Steve. There's been a little bit of discussion in the chat function with one of our friends noting that a state senator who sits on appropriations predicts a $10 billion deficit, but implies that education will be funded at last year's level. Any agreement with this? Number of folks have been chatting a bit about is 10 billion too high? IFO predicting 4 billion. I know that we at PBPC and KRC have said, this could be anywhere from 4.5 billion or up to 9 billion. It really depends somewhat on how long this continues. And I do think, based on, this is an opinion on my part, based on what we saw happen to Governor Corbett back in the previous recession, with some huge cuts to education funding, and the fact that he then became the first governor in half a century as an incumbent to not be reelected, means that there's probably likely to be some priority on maintaining public education funding. But that's the discussion. Steve, wanted to see if you had any thoughts on that.
Mark has been looking more closely at different estimates of the impact on state revenues. I mean, my own gut feeling is that 4 is low. Again, given what I just told you in terms of the scale of joblessness, and now, admittedly, one feature of this recession is it hits lower wage workers harder than typical. In terms of the impact on tax revenues, that makes them a bit lower because folks that don't earn as much don't pay, even under our regressive tax system, as much in taxes. But I think in the end, if the federal stimulus, which Sharon made this point in the chat box, I mean, it really, that's the only way that we'll escape in the short to medium term. The only way that we'll, I think, escape devastating cuts will be with a stimulus that's more generous, not less generous.
Thank you, Steve, and also thank you to Katie from our PBPC team, who put a link to the report that actually was a blog post, I think, that we had a few weeks ago on the KRC PBPC website, with some projections that we had related to potential revenue losses over the remainder of this fiscal year and into the 2020-21 fiscal year. I don't see any questions now, Steve, so if folks do have questions, please feel free to email them to me. I'll make sure that they get passed along to Steve, and we're going to continue on our agenda. Thanks so much, Steve.
Sure.
As I think some of you know, we had planned to do a budget day of action at the state capitol on Tuesday, June 2nd, prior to the pandemic, when we were envisioning legislators returning from Memorial Day recess to do a lot of the heavy lifting and negotiation around the state budget. We wanted to be there early to greet them. Obviously, that's not going to happen. In fact, I got official confirmation this week from the Capitol Events Office that we will not be able to be in the rotunda, although we had obviously already started working on other plans. Those other plans include a virtual day of action for people's budget coming up on Thursday, May 28th. That's 2 weeks from today. I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Campaigns, Kadida Kenner, who's going to talk a little bit about what we're envisioning for this virtual day of action. Kadida?
Thanks, Jeff. Hello, everybody. Great to see so many of your faces out there. We alluded to this a little bit last week, but I have a little more detail to share with you today as it relates to our virtual day of action for a people's budget. Hopefully you've seen this across social media, or you've received some kind of email from us, especially if you receive our We the People e-blast every other week. But we do have a very exciting event coming up 2 weeks from today, as was mentioned, on Thursday, May 28th. It's going to start at 4:30 in the afternoon. It's going to go about 90 minutes. And so, as Jeff mentioned, we can't be in the rotunda. We can't be walking through the halls of Harrisburg, but we can do these things virtually. So we're all getting very creative and innovative in these times of how we can still keep the same energy, make sure that we're still able to advocate for the things that we need and want and deserve. And so what we'll do on May 28th is we're going to gather on a Zoom call. The first 1,000 folks can join us. So space is limited. So I tell you today, please register for this event so you can ensure that you are inside the Zoom room, the exclusive Zoom room. Otherwise, we will broadcast this on different Facebook pages and other places. So I want you to know this about May 28th. It's going to be just as it would if it was in the rotunda. There will be some chanting. There will be some storytelling. There will be some advocacy and calls to action. There's also going to be legislative visits. So we're going to break out, if you've attended any of these Zoom meetings that have breakout rooms, we'll be breaking out into regions. And we've invited almost 100 legislators to attend this event. We've already gotten back some pretty good responses and quickly. So we do have, at least at this point, the appropriations chairs of both, the minority appropriation chairs of both the Senate and the House in attendance. And that's very important. Obviously, we're talking about the budget. It's a good thing to have the appropriation chairs with us on this day. And so this is an opportunity for you as constituents and organizers to invite your membership, for you to personally attend and be in a breakout room with your legislator to ask the questions that you have, for your members to ask the questions that they have, and to lobby for the things that we care about. So we've been talking earlier about the impact of what's going to happen to the budget due to COVID. And so we want to make sure that our legislators hear from us and know that any austere budget that's going to cut back on social service programs, and all the programs that we deserve and need here in the state, education, et cetera, that I've seen in the chat box that everyone has concerns about. We want to ensure that our voices are heard, and we will not stand for any cuts to those. And we need to, of course, increase our revenue, and we can do those things with like the fair share tax and other ideas we've been advocating for years. So we hope that you and your organizations will join us on May 28th in this virtual Zoom room for a virtual day of action. We're going to call some folks to the floor and hold folks accountable, especially those who we've invited and they've denied attendance, their participation. So there's links being shared in the chat box. There's also the graphic. If you are on Facebook, you've seen us share this event on Facebook as well. Please share this out. We appreciate anything you can do. I know that Jeff sends this out in his weekly emails. You'll get this as well from the e-blast from the We the People team. Anything you can do to help us get to this 1,000 people in a Zoom room. We want to make history this day with the largest possible event virtually. So we appreciate your support, and we hope to see you on May 28th at 4:30 in Zoom. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kadida. Thanks for your information about that. And again, folks, check the chat box. We have links and there are some graphics. We'd love to have all of our allies and friends here sharing this on their social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, both your organizational ones if you have them, or your personal ones as well. And we look forward to having hopefully all of you with us, plus several hundred other of our closest friends when we go live at 4:30, 2 weeks from today on Thursday, the 28th of May. A couple questions coming in the chat box there. One question, and Kadida, maybe you have some thoughts on this. Jordy is asking, what happens if our state legislators won't come to the Zoom room? Do we do it Tuesdays with Toomey?
What does that mean, do it Tuesdays with Toomey? No, I mean, obviously, we expect to have a good attendance of our legislators into these Zoom rooms. Jordy, I know that you're in a different part of the state here, where you may not have access to some of yours, but yes, if we are inviting the legislators where you live and they are not participating or not even responding to our requests, we're going to hold folks accountable for not listening to their constituents and the voice of the people.
Thanks, Kadida, and thanks for your question, Jordy. And, as we are publicizing this may be worthwhile for folks to send an email to their legislator or contact them via Facebook and social media. Maybe post the information about the virtual day of action there, along with how they can register, and put them on the spot. Ask them if they're planning to attend. So we're really excited about this. We think it's going to be a great day. There are a number of hashtags that are coming up there on the screen. along with those links. Just going to take care of a few other things here today on this call. First, let me apologize to Ron Cowell, our friend, who is with the Education Policy and Leadership Center. I believe I misspoke the name of the organization before, but we really appreciate the research that he does there and the role that he plays in helping to advocate for education funding in Pennsylvania. In the email invitation for today's meeting and for the reminder, I noted that we will be going now to a weekly schedule. We are going to try to do these with alternating guests every other week from outside of Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center and Keystone Research Center. Last week, we had Representative Matt Bradford, the chair of the House Appropriations Committee for the Democrats. We're hoping to bring some other guests on with us next week. But we will be here every Thursday at 1 p.m. We look forward to having you there. As we get close to each of those events, we'll send out the registration link so that you can register and get your login and have all of that information available to join us every Thursday at 1. We talked just briefly, touched on the fact that a lot is at stake for Pennsylvania, for our state budget, for workers who work either for state agencies or work with service provider organizations that have contracts with the state, for the many folks who would be affected by a budget that makes significant cuts that I think no one would like to see. But as was noted, a lot of this is going to depend on federal assistance coming to Pennsylvania. As you know, there have been 3 packages so far, plus what's maybe called the 3.5 package a few weeks ago. But all of these efforts at relief fall a bit short when it comes to helping state governments deal with a significant loss of revenue, like we've been talking about here in Pennsylvania and that every other state is looking at. There is a need to have additional funding coming from the federal level to cover these revenue losses so that cuts don't have to be made. And that has to be made possible in a way that it's not just for, as we've seen so far, funding for COVID response efforts, but that really has to be geared towards states using this kind of funding for the long-term economic relief and recovery that's going to be necessary as we come out of the pandemic. And I think probably many of you have seen that over the last couple of days, we've been hearing about legislation that's been introduced in the US Congress. It's been introduced by Speaker Pelosi. It's an acronym, it's the HEROES Act. There are a lot of really great things in here that provide relief to some of the individuals who are being harmed the most. It makes some corrections to some of the short-sightedness and oversights that existed in the previous COVID response packages. And it also includes significant resources for state governments. Whether or not this passes, whether or not this is enacted by the House when it votes tomorrow, there's scheduled to be a floor vote tomorrow, and whether or not when it goes to the Senate, how it fares in the Senate, and whether or not it gets signed by President Trump, will have a lot to do with what our budget looks like this next year. This is a call and a meeting that we have scheduled for state budget advocacy, but this is one really where we see how federal policies are deeply intertwined with what happens with our state government. And it's really critically important that we see the kind of funding that's proposed in the HEROES Act passed tomorrow in the US House, moved forward in the Senate, and ultimately signed by Trump. This is a $3 trillion package. It is a really bold and visionary effort to bring about the recovery. We have heard already that Mitch McConnell in the Senate and many other Senate Republicans have come out and said they're just not convinced that there's a need for this right now, and they want to take a wait and see attitude. We will be working on trying to elevate the concerns that people have and the need for this via our, as we've talked about the last few weeks, our campaign here in Pennsylvania working on federal issues in conjunction with a lot of our national allies. We're calling it the 99% Pennsylvania campaign, and we will be sharing information there that's already up on the Facebook page for the 99% Pennsylvania. We'll be having our website up and running shortly, but we will be sharing action alerts. The key one right now is, and if you go to that Facebook page for the 99% PA, you will see there is an effort to get calls into our representatives for the U.S. House of Representatives from Pennsylvania. We would encourage you to go there to make a call to your member of Congress's office. If you want to follow up with emails, other ways you might have of getting in contact with your congressperson, that would be great, because this is going to the floor for a vote in the House tomorrow. One other item that is not directly part of the state budget meetings and the calls that we've been having here and our work on the state budget is something that we at Pennsylvania Budget and Policy are really excited about. We value you all as important allies and friends, and we want to invite you to join us for something that we're launching today at 4:30 p.m. It's going to be happening every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. It'll be a very brief Zoom meeting. It will last for 30 minutes or less. And it'll be a weekly opportunity for you to find out about the range of policy issues that we are concerned about with the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center and the Keystone Research Center, our We the People campaign, the 99% PA campaign. And we'll be sharing not just information about new resources that we've created and concerns that we have, but we'll also be sharing each week one specific way for you to take action, even before that Zoom call ends. We're really excited about it. I included in the invitation email for this Zoom meeting, as a reminder, down at the bottom, there's a little PS section. You can find that information there. You do not need to register for this Zoom meeting at 4:30 today. You can just follow that. You will need to use the login and the passcode and the PIN numbers that are included there. But again, this is not specifically part of this state budget advocacy campaign, but we'll obviously be talking a lot about the state budget on this Thursday at 4:30 every week call and Zoom meeting that we're doing. So we want to invite you to join us for that. Just taking a look here really quickly, see if there are any final questions.
Hey, Jeff, if I could jump in there for a second, just
Sure.
to reiterate there about the Capital Insider calls. So I just want to put this out there to all of you. There's still so many of you on this call. What we're doing these Thursdays is that it's an exclusive event, right? So this is an opportunity for those of you out there who belong to like the Sephora Beauty Insiders or the JCPenney Insiders, or you have your Giant card and you get special discounts. This is the same kind of thing. This is an opportunity for you to be exclusive, an exclusive club of folks who are insiders, Harrisburg insiders, for you to get the most exclusive information and call to action, and for you to share this information out within your circles so that we can get the greatest impact for this. This is an opportunity for us to take an action in real time and make an impact every Thursday at 4:30, so that at some point our legislators are going to wonder what is happening at 4:30 on a Thursday that I'm always being contacted at this time with some type of issue. So just if you can attend today, we would love to have you. It's our first one. We're hoping to get the attendance up and grow every week. So if you can join us today at 4:30 for this quick 20, maybe 30-minute Zoom call, we would love to have you.
Thanks, Kadida. As you can tell, we are really excited about this, and I really appreciate Kadida playing a leading role in this and helping to share with you our vision for this and where we want to see this implemented and the opportunities that exist for you to be part of this exclusive insider group of folks who are concerned about policy issues. There are a couple of questions folks had in the chat box related to fair share tax plan, also asking a bit about how some things would be implemented with personal protective equipment for frontline workers and others. We will try to follow up with you here directly on those questions for the folks who asked them via email here in the next few hours. If not today, then definitely tomorrow. So if you did have specific questions on that, we will be following up with you. But we do want to give folks an opportunity to head out, take care of the additional things you need to do. I'm sure everybody's jumping from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting. We do appreciate you taking the time to be with us here today and every Thursday at 1 p.m. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with some information on taking action on this HEROES Act at the federal level, with information about our weekly 4:30 insider Zoom meetings that you're invited to, as well as additional information on state budget and policy issues. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you next Thursday at 1 and probably at 4:30 today as well. Take care. Bye.